Hey guys, welcome back to Election Center, and in this video, I'm going to be showing you guys the status of the 2020 Senate elections and where the numbers lie in these races. So just to clarify, this is not a prediction of what will happen, and in some races, one candidate might be leading, but another candidate, I might think they're going to win. But yeah, I just think it'd be interesting for this video to run down the numbers and basically fill in this map accordingly, keeping track of where the races lie right now, looking at the data. We're going to start off, let's just start off here, I guess, with the state of Michigan. We got to start somewhere, but, starting off with Michigan here, Gary Peters, Democratic incumbent, versus John James, the Republican challenger. And let me show you guys the Michigan data right now. Here on the 538 website, 538.com, they have the polls, and let's look for Michigan here. Okay, Michigan. So we see here Peters with a clear lead over James. John James, just to tell you about the candidates, by the way, Peters is the incumbent Democrat, and then John James, Republican challenger, who I believe ran in a race before and lost that race, and I think this is his second go. But yeah, that's just their background. But anyway, back to the data here. So possibly the race is narrowing up according to some recent polls. +4, +7 for Peters. And then there was a poll that showed just, 3-point. And I think there was a poll that actually showed John James with the lead. It was from Trafalgar Group, though. So that's the Republican bias. James +2 in this Trafalgar Group poll. But yeah, Peters has had a steady lead going way back. Earlier on, it was, sometimes +18. This A+ rated poll showed Peters +10. And it looks like sort of at the same time that things were narrowing up for Trump at the presidential level, things were narrowing up at the Senate level as well in some of these races. One of these races is Michigan, where some polls were coming out that showed a tightening race at the presidential level. And then at the same time that was happening for James here in the Senate. But maybe sort of also in line with how Biden managed to rebound in some of these Rust Belt states. Peters also did slightly. It's narrower than it was before, but Peters still with the clear lead in this race. So I don't know, maybe John James has a chance to win, but it's looking like Peters is having a consistent lead. So that's sort of where the data is right now in Michigan. And now another race to look at is Minnesota. So what's happening in Minnesota is Smith versus Lewis. And from the data I've seen, it looks like Democrat Smith has a consistent lead over Lewis. Tina Smith, maybe just the incumbent advantage. Also, Biden leading substantially in Minnesota. So it looks like Tina Smith has the lead right now according to the numbers. But yeah, interesting race possibly in Minnesota. We're going to see maybe if Donald Trump is able to have a victory here in Minnesota, that a lot of people on the right are talking about happening, that could sweep a Republican into Minnesota. Minnesota, people are saying right now that it's trending to the right, so we'll see what happens in Minnesota. But yeah, now moving on to, let's move on to Iowa. This is a real interesting race I want to show you guys in Iowa, just because of how close it is right now, from the data I've seen. The latest poll shows Ernst, I believe it's pronounced, Joni Ernst, with the lead over Greenfield, the Democrat, losing to the Republican Joni Ernst. So you'd think that's a solid lead, but look back here to some of the earlier polling. First off, this is just one poll, right? Could be an outlier. Doesn't even have a rating on 538. And then we go back here. Democratic pollster public policy polling showing Greenfield with the lead. Some of these polls showing Greenfield with the lead. And then these A+ rated polls showing Ernst with a narrow lead. So it's almost really too close to call, or to say who's leading here. And I want to show you guys the Real Clear Politics average in Iowa. They don't have as many polls, but from what Real Clear Politics is including, they show a 0.3 lead for Greenfield. So we can't actually fill in Iowa on this map. I just don't really think we can make that call right now as to who's leading. But yeah, possibly Greenfield has the advantage, possibly based off of this latest poll, the advantage going to the Republicans. But we'll have to see what happens. But let's look at Real Clear Politics for a little. I want to show you guys the graph here. In Arizona, Mark Kelly, Democratic challenger, to Martha McSally, Republican. So Mark Kelly, former astronaut, that he does have that on his resume. I think he's a Navy captain, former Navy captain. And so now he's taking a shot at the Arizona Senate. And then as for Martha McSally here, she did narrowly lose a 2018 Arizona Senate race to the Democrat and was appointed to fill the vacant Arizona Senate seat. So she is a senator now, filling that vacant seat. And now she's running for Arizona Senate, and she's hoping, of course, to win in her own right. But moving on to the data here, I want to show you guys here, Kelly has had a really consistent lead over McSally here. So it looks like the last time it was at all narrow on this average, Kelly had a 5-point lead. But yeah, sort of in line with how Biden has had a real consistent lead in Arizona. Kelly has also had a real consistent lead, and both of their leads seem to be unwavering. And so let's look at the individual polls here. That's what 538 is showing. Real Clear Politics is showing on their average. Of course, 538 maybe includes more polls. They include more polls, but I want to show you guys 538 here. And what they're showing for Arizona, the polls that they've put on their website. Once again, we're seeing this picture of really consistent lead for Kelly. Just not that long ago, Fox News A- pollster giving Kelly a 17-point lead in these two Fox News polls. So really solid in those polls. 19, and then it looks like there's a lot of maybe inconsistent data as well. Change Research giving Kelly just a 6-point lead. On Message Incorporated, this looks like what that's called. Showed just a dead heat. But the last time there was a poll with McSally in the lead, I want to show you guys. It was a really long time. Look how far back I have to scroll. McSally, that was way back in July 1st, and the surrounding polls still show Kelly with the lead. So, Kelly has had a real consistent lead, and it seems to just be holding steady. But we'll have to see what happens there in Arizona. This is the status of the Arizona race, basically. So, keeping track, filling this in blue on the map. And now in Georgia, I know there is the special election in Georgia, but as for the regular election, John Ossoff versus Purdue. Let's go to Georgia here. I'll pull up Real Clear Politics and as well as 538. David Perdue, incumbent Republican, versus John Ossoff, the Democrat. There's the special election where I don't think the primary's been held yet, but we're seeing maybe a tight race between Perdue and Ossoff. It looks like Purdue has the lead, but maybe there's some more recent polling. You look at the RCP averages. Sometimes I notice maybe they're possibly misleading because of how long they can span. The dates that this spans from are June through August, so that's a long time span, and they're including polls in the same average. They also maybe have less polls than 538. And look, the last poll was earlier on in August, so we're in September now, so things could have changed. And what it looks like in the more recent polling is that maybe it has shifted to Ossoff a tad. I look at Real Clear Politics. I don't see Ossoff leading in any of these polls, but I do see Ossoff with the occasional lead here. So I did actually say maybe it shifted to Ossoff a little bit. But what could also be happening is that it just happens to be that Real Clear Politics hasn't included any of the polls where Ossoff has led. That's actually what I'm thinking. So what seems to be the picture right now in Georgia is Purdue normally with the lead, but then there's occasionally a poll that puts Ossoff ahead of Purdue. But we're gonna keep track here and fill this in red right now for Purdue. But another interesting race here is Maine, where Susan Collins, incumbent Republican, trying to fend off a challenge here from the Democratic candidate Sarah Gideon, who on Real Clear Politics has a 4.5 lead. But let's check on 538 to see if there's some more recent polling. Looking at the current status of this race, it looks like, Gideon maintaining the lead. So this is pretty much what I thought was happening. Based off of the data that I've been seeing, Gideon has had the steady lead over Collins. Collins is probably going to have a tough time getting re-elected if these types of numbers keep on coming in. Just to show you, we had this one poll from early July, seems like kind of an outlier, where Collins led. And then we have this really old polling from a year ago, Collins leading. But I think her popularity has dropped substantially, according to something I've seen that gave me that impression. Susan Collins' popularity dropped. So yeah, she's behind Gideon right now. So that's why we're keeping track here, filling that in blue on the map. And then just to move along now, Montana. Real interesting race in Montana. That's the former governor, Steve Bullock, the Democrat, who actually ran for president for the Democratic nomination in 2020. That didn't really take off. But now he's going for Senate. And I think he might be term limited. Going for Senate. And I think he's narrowly trailing Steve Daines. Let's look at the data here. From the data that I've seen, Daines is, with the narrow lead over Bullock. It looked like earlier on, Bullock had the lead. Let's check on Real Clear Politics here. Earlier on, Bullock possibly had the lead. But, this is flipped to Daines. And I think when Bullock had the lead, that was kind of more when Biden was flying high in the polls. But now things have sort of gone to where you would more expect. And Daines has the narrow lead. We'll fill that in blue on our map. Red on the map right now. That's the status of the race in Montana. Filling it in red on our map. North Carolina, interesting race here. Cunningham with the narrow lead. Let me show you guys North Carolina data. So Cunningham had a really large lead in North Carolina, and Tom Tillis, the Republican, by the way, Cunningham is the Democrat, seems to be rapidly closing the gap. We go way further back. Cunningham had a far larger lead than he does right now. He still has a lead, but it's not nearly as big. Just to illustrate that, let me show you guys the graph on Real Clear Politics, and you see just how quickly that gap closed. You'll see here, at one point, Real Clear Politics was averaging it out as a 10-point lead almost for Cunningham, 9.7. That rapidly closed. And for a while, it's been wavering around just a 3-point lead or so for Cunningham. And so we'll have to see what happens in this race. But keeping track here, filling it in blue on the map. That's the status of the race in North Carolina. We'll see if Tom Tillis can pull off victory. But right now, Cunningham seems to have a consistent, albeit narrow, lead over Tillis. Maybe this is sort of in line with what was happening at the presidential level too, where Biden had a large lead that rapidly, or maybe not super rapidly. Biden had the lead, and then that flips to a Trump lead, at least on Real Clear Politics. And then Biden, I think, retook the lead narrowly. It's interesting to compare what's going on at the presidential level and what's going on at the Senate level, because they are linked, They don't exactly mirror each other, but they are linked. Candidates have coattails or whatever, or just the general mood of that state. Maybe people are more, in the mood to support the Democrat at the time on both levels. So say there's an issue, right, that is important to people that it's felt like Republicans aren't handling well, then more people are going to support the Democrat on all levels. But, maybe if Donald Trump had a major gaffe or something on the campaign trail, that wouldn't necessarily hit Tillis, right? So I think it's interesting to sort of compare what's going on at the Senate level versus these presidential races. That's interesting in my opinion. That's the status of the race in North Carolina. And so now I want to show you guys Texas, because I think this is an interesting race. Because Cornyn has a larger lead, far larger lead than Trump has in this race, of some 9 percentage points here. Let's look at the data here, and let's sort of do a compare and contrast of the presidential race and the Senate race. So I want to show you guys at the presidential level. This really caught my eye here. Texas, just a 0.8 lead for Trump on the 538 average. And then on Real Clear Politics, they're showing a similar thing. Real narrow lead. What are they showing? They're showing just a 3.5 lead for Trump on Real Clear Politics. But then we look at the Senate, and Cornyn having a large lead. Public policy polling, they have the Democratic bias. They're showing just a 4-point gap. But all these other polls showing really solid leads for Cornyn. So yeah, I think maybe Biden has a long shot chance at winning Texas, but for the Democrat here, MJ Heger, trailing a lot more behind than Biden. So we're filling that in red on the map. But that is an interesting dynamic that's currently playing out right now in Texas. But yeah, filling that in red on the map. And now let's do another state, Colorado, where I haven't seen too many polls come out. But I do want to show you guys John Hickenlooper, former Colorado governor, running for Senate here against Gardner, the Republican. And from the polling they've put on Real Clear Politics, it seems to be a solid lead for Hickenlooper, who, by the way, Hickenlooper is one of the many people who tried to seek the Democratic nomination. But yeah, this is not really a surprise to me, considering Colorado is more to the left. Not really a true level playing field. But yeah, interesting here in Colorado, Joe Biden with a huge lead over Trump. And now Hickenlooper, former Colorado governor, trying to win the Senate. So, and former failed presidential candidate. But yeah, that's what's going on in Colorado. So, moving on to some of these other states here. Virginia, the data I've seen showed a large lead for the Democrats. And yeah, sort of falling in line with how this state has been trending leftward. Yeah, that's what's going on in Virginia. And, South Carolina, I think a strong challenge, possibly Lindsey Graham. Harrison, putting up a strong challenge to Graham. But, yeah, we'll see. Harrison obviously has a long shot at being able to unseat Graham. But, yeah, in all likelihood, this is going to stick with Graham in South Carolina. So filling that in red on the map. Another interesting race here where, believe it or not, there is a Democratic incumbent. Doug Jones is the Democratic incumbent in Alabama, who was able to narrowly win the 2017 special election against Republican Roy Moore, probably just because of the super serious controversy around Roy Moore. If it weren't for that, I don't think Doug Jones would have been able to win in such a deep red state. But yeah, and that's being reflected in the polls we've seen come out where the Republican tends to have a large lead, and I think Tuberville is the nominee against Jones. So this is in all likelihood going to go to Tuberville. And so, yeah, we're filling it in red on the map. And the state I want to show you guys is Alaska. Real interesting here in Alaska. Alaska, where it's sometimes closer in these races like the Senate or the gubernatorial races, even though the Republicans win heavily at the presidential level. So we're seeing in these matchups here, Republican versus Democrat. One of these, it looks like maybe it's Libertarian versus Republican or something like that. Maybe a bit narrow. And then this Democratic pollster showing things even. But, yeah, realistically, Sullivan has a solid lead over the Democrat. So, yeah, we'll see what happens in Alaska. We'll see what the margins are, but probably it's just going to go to the Republican. And, yeah, so filling in some more of these races here. Ed Markey here in Massachusetts. This is probably just going to go to him, right? We'll see what happens in terms of the margins. But, yeah, there was a bitter primary contest between Ed Markey and Joe Kennedy, the challenger. But, yeah, Ed Markey, you can watch my video on that as to why he was able to win. And, Joe Kennedy posing maybe a strong challenge, you could say, but, not really able to win enough votes to unseat the incumbent. And so yeah, Kevin O'Connor most likely not going to really have any chance at beating Markey in the general election. And then some of these safer Democratic states, right? A lot of these states, people don't really have too much polling out of just because it's expected to go one way or the other. We have interesting case here in Kentucky. Mitch McConnell. People are talking about his challenger. Kentucky, McGrath, the Democratic challenger, who also had a pretty competitive primary against a progressive candidate. So we're seeing maybe things surprisingly close. And there's actually been a lot of polling out of Kentucky, it looks like. But yeah, McConnell probably going to beat McGrath in the general election. So filling that in red on the map. Another interesting state is Kansas, where we're seeing things kind of surprisingly close. But once again, it looks like the Republicans with the most likely lead. We look here, Bollier here, a strong challenge considering it's a red state. But let's be real here. This is probably going to go to the Republicans in the general election. I'm filling in a lot of these states here, right, that are really just expected to go one way or the other. New Hampshire, obviously this is a competitive race, just because New Hampshire is a competitive state. I want to show you guys New Hampshire briefly. This is because there hasn't been too much data out of New Hampshire for us to analyze, right? But I want to show you guys it anyway. Yeah, it looks like the Democrats with a consistent lead. I'm not sure if possibly the Republicans have not nominated a candidate yet. But yeah, Shaheen, it looks like, is taking the lead in all of these polls. Shaheen is the incumbent. Let's look here. Bolduc versus Shaheen. I believe Shaheen is the incumbent. And then a lot of these states here just most likely going to go to one party. Same with, I think, maybe this special election in Georgia, where the nominations haven't quite happened. But yeah, I believe that it will go to the Republicans in the state of Georgia. But yeah, guys, so this sort of final map, where we sort of looked at the polling in a lot of these races that people are talking about, where there's a lot of buzz around, or, it's interesting to look at the data. And then we sort of briefly touched up on some of these races where maybe it's really, these safe states, right? Some of these safe states where we're seeing surprisingly strong challenges like Kentucky, right? Or Montana, where things can be close on the presidential, on the senatorial level, even though it votes so heavily Republican on the presidential level. Yeah, and then Iowa here, where it seems to maybe right now be a toss-up. I really think it's going to go to the Republicans here in Iowa, but there's technically no data to back that up right now, just in terms of polling data at the senatorial level. But yeah, that puts the Republicans at 49, according to this current data, and the Democrats at 50. So that would mean if Joe Biden wins and this data comes true, say the Republicans win Iowa, as I think is going to happen, then if Joe Biden wins the election, his running mate Kamala Harris would sort of be the tie-breaking vote, giving the Democrats control of the Senate if it's a 50-50 Senate. So yeah, that would really be interesting if that happened, to see sort of what goes down there. I guess it would really be sort of if the Democrats are able to convince one or two Republicans onto their side, or Republicans able to convince a Democrat or two to go to their side, they're sort of going to have the win on that bill, maybe. This is sort of just these hypothetical thoughts I'm having on that situation. But yeah, that's going to be interesting to see if that happens. And so Democrats really also, though, have a great opportunity to take back the Senate right now. There's just a lot of tight races that they have a chance to win. And if you look at the seats that are up for grabs, Republicans are defending a lot more seats than the Democrats. So it's interesting to see. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Maybe the Republicans will have a tougher time, just because they're defending so many more seats than the Democrats. I believe it's like 23 the Republicans are defending, 12 the Democrats are defending. But we'll see what happens here. But yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video and thought it was interesting. And, let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments on all this. I'm interested in hearing, your predictions, your interpretations of the data. I'm interested in knowing your guys' thoughts on all that. And, maybe I can have a conversation with you in the comments about all this. Because, I really am interested in this stuff and knowing your guys' thoughts on all of it. But yeah, if you like this type of content I make here on this channel about elections where I fill out, electoral maps, Senate maps, and sort of analyze the data, right? And just all things related to elections. This type of content, if you're into this sort of thing, you should definitely subscribe to my YouTube channel because my videos are going to be right up your alley. But yeah, I say it once again, I hope you enjoyed this video, thought it was interesting, and I will see you in the next Election Center video. Bye, guys.